Welcome to It's All Geek to Me, a podcast where two friends experience popular nerdy franchises for the first time. My name is Leah, and this season my co-host Kelli and I will be traveling to a galaxy far, far away as Kelli experiences Star Wars for the very first time. And I'm the expert. Let's dive in.
All right, we are back for part 2 of Star Wars, episode 4, A New Hope.
Hey,
did I get it right?
You did. That was perfect.
Yes.
Great job.
These movies have some long names, let me tell you.
They do. They only get longer.
Oh, great. Something to look forward to.
So the last thing we saw was Luke saw the charred bodies of his aunt and uncle.
Yes.
Very sad.
You know, you made me a little sad again remembering that because I think this section is a lot happier.
It is, yeah.
It's more exciting.
Fun.
Yeah, it's getting to be a little fun. Still absolutely nothing like what I expected it to be. I'll be honest with you.
Nice.
But yeah, let's just dive right in. So we actually start this section with Darth Vader coming on over to Princess Leia, who is his prisoner. And he says it's time to discuss the hidden base. Mm-hmm. And he has a little droid robot guy with him. I said droid this time, but I also included robot just in case. And the droid has a needle, which I wasn't sure what that meant, but we find out pretty soon what that means.
But essentially, I think it was obvious that he was about to in some way torture her.
That's what I figured it was, but I think it's a little bit more mild than that.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So yeah, then we cut back to Luke Skywalker. He comes back to our dear old friend Obi and also C-3PO and R2-D2. And they are still at the site where the Jawas were basically murdered. Mm-hmm. And C-3PO and R2-D2 are actually burning them in the background, which I thought was a really interesting touch. You know, people, as I've learned in this section, don't really have the respect for droids. I know you mentioned it in the last episode, but I really saw a lot of it in this one, but they're still doing this respectful thing. Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe Obi told them to do it. So I could be wrong.
You calling him Obi, I just can't with this.
I think it's a great nickname.
It's
for
cute.
him.
Okay, yeah. I'll let you experience the trilogy the way you want to experience it.
Thank you. I love Obi so far. Me and my pal Obi. So then Obi tells Luke that there was nothing that he could have done to save them. It was inevitable. And Luke tells him that he wants to learn how to use the Force and he wants to come with him to
Alderaan.
So then Obi takes him to a city and I didn't catch the name of it.
The city is called Mos Eisley and it's a spaceport and it's full of scum and
villainy. Yeah. I wrote that down because I knew you would like it.
Yeah.
And Obi tells him that he's got to be pretty cautious. And then we see them cruising through the city in the cruiser and we see some more very impressive CGI animals that now at this point I have to assume that they were put in later.
Those are also put in later. That was another part. There were actually two other significant moments in this section that were changed from the original, but I will point them out. And I feel like you know where they are.
I can guess where they are. Don't worry.
I'll give you my fun facts when we get there.
Ooh, I'm excited for that part. But actually, the next scene that happens, I loved.
Yes.
So they get stopped by stormtroopers while they're in the cruiser, and they are asked how long they've had the droids for. And Luke is very quick on his feet, and he says, oh, we've had them like 3 or 4 seasons. And then Obi says, oh, they're for sale if you're interested. And I just thought that was some really quick thinking of them.
Think so too.
I don't think that they planned to say it at all, but it was just very well done. So I always appreciate when characters don't have a plan, but they play off of each other very well.
Yes.
So I loved that. And then the stormtroopers ask him for identification, and Obi-Wan is like, you don't need identification. And the stormtrooper is like, I don't need identification. And I just died. I loved
this
it.
Scene.
Oh, so good.
This was the first moment in that terrible date that I had where I started losing my mind, because this was where he was like reciting the lines, and it's like, this is the first moment where you're seeing Obi-Wan use the Force. And as a viewer, you want to experience that and realize that. But no, this guy had to tell me what was going on as if I couldn't figure it out for myself.
Man. That honestly doesn't sound so much like a date as it sounds like when you're babysitting and you have a very eager toddler telling you what happens.
That's
like
so
in the
true.
movie that you're watching with them.
And you're like, yeah, kid, I'm an intelligent person. I can figure this out for myself.
And then Obi says something that I feel like I've heard you say before. He says, these aren't the droids you're looking for. For some reason, that was so familiar. Do you say that or have you to me?
So I actually have a pair of like little booty shorts that have a picture of R2-D2 on them. And it says, this is the droid you're looking for. So I probably mentioned those shorts before.
Is that embarrassing that I know that?
That is, no. I've mentioned them before because I got them at a Comic-Con, and actually the woman who makes them was a contestant on Survivor. So it was like a really exciting thing that I saw them at Comic-Con. I was like, wow, these shorts are so cute. And then I saw her and I was like, oh my gosh, you're from Survivor, which if anyone doesn't know is like my favorite reality competition show. So obviously I had to buy them, and those are the ones that I got. This is the droid you're looking for. So that's probably, how you know it.
Now that you mention it, yes, I do remember you calling me excitedly and telling me that story. And I was like, this doesn't mean anything to me, Leah.
And now it does.
And now it does. So yes, good little moment there. Very cool display of power. And then they head over to a bar, and C-3PO for some reason is very rude to the Jawas that show up. I don't know what the Jawas were doing when they came over to their cruiser, but I just noticed that C-3PO was being so rude, and I was thinking that's so interesting because everyone is so rude to the droids, and then C-3PO is rude to these Jawas.
I thought the same thing, but I think that the Jawas, there's a chance that they could have been trying to steal something off of the cruiser, like stealing parts or whatever. So I think that was his motivation.
So then Obi says that they're looking for a pilot, but they got to be warned because this place is pretty rough. And then I just wrote in all caps over the course of 2 lines in my notebook, LMAO, because this bar is unlike anything I have ever seen in my life. First of all, there's all these incredibly, they're just very dated looking creatures. And then randomly there's just one shot of like a very well-made creature. And I was like, this is the inserted CGI.
So originally this scene, the aliens in the bar were just like really horrible Halloween store masks of like wolves and goblins and stuff. And it just looked so cheap. So yeah, this scene was updated.
How many times though? Because I feel like there was some different levels of CGI in there.
Yeah, multiple times.
Because there was one that I was like, this is believable. And then there was just a bunch that reminded me. Did you watch Power Rangers as a kid?
I did, but like,
you don't remember it.
It's lost on me. I remember nothing.
I just feel like all the bad guys looked like that.
Yeah.
So it was just absolutely incredible. There are some alien creatures playing some jazz music, which I thought really added to the atmosphere. Loved that. And then the bartender is just immediately like, get out. We don't serve your kind here. To the droids.
Yeah.
And Luke is like, yeah, just go. We don't want any trouble. Which I'm thinking, is that a good idea to leave 2 droids just outside when there are stormtroopers looking for droids?
Yeah, I think that's part of the plot too, though, is like, oh, we got to get the droids out of the bar because the stormtroopers have to notice the droids outside.
I was just screaming in frustration at the TV for that.
But it does also show, a continuation of this classism that exists in this universe where droids are seen as lesser creatures. But we have seen they have feelings, they have emotions, they have minds just as much as anybody else does.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we get this very interesting moment. I don't know how old Luke Skywalker is, but to get the bartender's attention to order a drink, he tugs on his sleeve.
Oh my God. If I was bartending and somebody did that to me, they would be kicked out instantly.
100%. 100. Who's touching the bartender? That's not appropriate to do ever.
No.
You wave your hand and then they notice you or they don't. You just have to wait your turn. I cannot believe that he yanked on his sleeve like that. So I was offended on the bartender's behalf, but it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah.
And then we have this guy come up to Luke and start a fight with him. And I actually felt like this was such a great callback to our first season of It's All Geek to Me when we watched The Lord of the Rings. Because this guy, I wrote him down as Pigface.
Yes, because he had a pig
He
nose.
did have a pig face. And he's just starting a fight for literally no reason.
No reason.
He's just like, oh, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to beat you
And
up.
he's like, I got a death sentence in 12 systems. Like, why are you flaunting that information?
Yeah, seriously. That is not something to brag brag about. You could get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So Luke doesn't want to engage with him, but the guy is trying to start a fight anyway. And then Obi shows up out of nowhere. He pulls out his lightsaber. I was about to call it a wand. He pulls out his magic wand and he just straight up chops this guy's arm off, which I have some thoughts on that. I don't know what the symbolism is of getting your arm chopped off, but it seems to be a theme in this movie because up to this section that like after we finish this, there have been 3 arm chopping offs. So I just thought that was really weird. Like that's a very specific body part that keeps getting chopped off.
It may just be easy for them to have done that sort of trickery, honestly.
I'm just looking into it.
As the actor, you can just pull your arm into your sleeve and it looks like you don't have an arm anymore. I'm thinking just it being the 70s. It could have just been the easiest thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm just thinking like if I was getting in a fight with somebody who's trying to kill me, I would just try to stab them in the gut.
Yeah.
But
you're like, the arms, what's the meaning?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the meaning in the arms.
There is none.
What is the symbolism? Like, when you dream about losing an arm, what is the symbolism of that? Let's apply it to this movie. No, but I did think that was an interesting thing that just keeps on happening. But I guess you're right. It's just a little bit easier to do the arm. And then I wrote, oh, expletive, it's Han Solo. And I don't know why my reactions to seeing familiar characters is to just write, oh, expletive. But I just keep getting excited to see what they look like because who is this actor?
Harrison Ford.
Yes. Okay. I didn't want to say it just in case it wasn't, but I was like, this is a familiar face. Up until this point, I know that all of these actors are very famous for this body of work, but I haven't recognized anyone. So he was the first one that I recognized. And we also got introduced to Chewie, who is a Wookiee, which I love that name. So I absolutely love Chewie the Wookiee and Han and... Can we call him Han?
Yeah, we can call him
Han. I don't know. You get mad at me for calling him Obi.
Obi's not his name.
His name is Obi and Han. But anyway, so Han Solo is the pilot of the Millennial Falcon, and he said he has outrun the Imperialists before. He says he's super fast. And at first I thought that he was just a very upstanding guy, but then he's just kind of trying to haggle with them on how much money he can get for piloting them over to Alderaan.
Also, when he talks about the Millennium Falcon, he's like, you've never heard of the Millennium Falcon? And Ben's like, no, should I have? And he's like, we did the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs, which is what the Falcon is famous for, but nobody really knows that except for Han.
Leah, we need to talk. What's going on here? Why are you calling it a Falcon?
That's how they pronounce it, the Millennium Falcon.
I'm crying. I can't. Oh my gosh.
That's literally how they pronounce it.
Is it not the Falcon?
Falcon is the same thing. It's just a different pronunciation.
Falcon. Oh my goodness. I see another poll in our future on Twitter.
That is how they pronounce it.
I'm not calling it that. I'm calling it the Falcon.
You can call it the Falcon. It's fine. But they definitely call it the Millennium Falcon.
I just realized that my notes also says the Millennial Falcon.
Giving some love to your millennial self.
I do love being a millennial. But anyway, so he offers to pilot them for $10,000, which he doesn't actually say dollars. He just says...
They just say 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah.
Which is also reminiscent of a previous season of It's All Geek to Me.
I was thinking that too.
Because in The Princess Bride, they do not have any currency in The Princess Bride. And apparently they don't here either. But Luke is so offended by this offer. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
He's like, no, we could buy a ship for that price. And Han's like, well, who's going to pilot it? Duh.
Luke's like, I'll pilot it.
Oh yeah, he's like, I'm a fair flyer. I'm a good pilot. I know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And Obi's like, calm down, child. We're gonna pay $2,000 now and $15,000 later. I'm just gonna call it dollars because that's just my currency.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then obviously Han is like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. That's like a lot more than I asked for. So then it seems like trouble has arrived in this bar because stormtroopers are there. And the bartender actually points out where Luke and Obi are. So I'm guessing, I thought that the reason that the stormtroopers came was because of the lightsaber, but you seem to think that it was because of the droids outside.
Regardless of what it was, they don't want to be talking to stormtroopers.
Right. So they do actually sneak out, which was pretty well done because, I thought for a second there that they were going to be in trouble. But then they sneak out. Obi says, you got to sell your your cruiser? And Luke is like, yeah, that's fine. I'm never coming back to this planet anyway, which I thought was a really important line.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, just like him being so done with this and just ready for the next step in his life and knowing he's got nothing left here.
Yeah. So meanwhile, we see Han being stopped by another alien guy.
His name's Greedo.
Ooh, what a good name for a bad guy.
Greedo.
I love that. Wow, I did not get that name. Sorry.
I mean, he's got about 2 minutes of screen time, but he is a very popular character in the franchise.
Honestly, totally love him. But yeah, so it turns out that Han is not the good, upstanding pilot that I thought he was. Seems like he is in a little bit of a debt with Jabba, who I wrote down must be the big slug guy. And I was totally right.
You were right.
Yeah. I don't remember
Nice.
who did I say was the slug guy.
You thought it was Boba Fett.
Okay, but as soon as he said Jabba, I was like, that sounds like the name of a giant slug man. So, I mean, I don't know what he is officially, but we'll talk about him in a minute because he is funny. I've got thoughts. Yeah. So then they're going back and forth, Han and Greedo, great name, and he is saying like, don't worry, I'm going to get Jabba the money. I have it. I'm doing an easy transport and then I'm just going to give him the money. And Greedo is not having it and he's like, give me the money now. They have a little back and forth and then I don't remember who instigates it, but it seems like the conversation is over and it is time for a little shootout. But Han has his hand on his blaster and he shoots Greedo and kills him.
It's interesting that you say you don't know who instigated it because I can tell you who instigated it.
Well, that's what you're here for, expert.
And this is a heavily debated topic.
Ooh.
It's very quick, so it's kind of hard to see it. But in this version of the film, Greedo's blaster goes off first, and Han's head kind of shuffles to the side a little bit in a very strange motion that makes no sense. And then Han's blaster goes off. The reason this is so heavily debated, and you can go to any Comic-Con, any sort of nerd convention, and you will see someone there that has a shirt on that says Han shot first. Because in the original version, Greedo never shoots his blaster, only Han shoots his blaster.
Wow.
But in the re-releases, George Lucas wanted Han to appear to be a little bit nicer than he is, so he wanted to add Greedo shooting first to show that Han is somewhat of a good guy. But the truth is, not that Han's a bad guy, but Han is a smuggler. He's not
a bad guy, but he is a bad guy.
But he's like the bad guy you love.
Yeah,
like, you know
absolutely.
what I mean?
Yeah, he's like an anti-hero a little bit.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, in this, Greedo shot first, but in our hearts, Han shot first.
So that's really interesting because I did write down not sure who did it, but I think it was Han. So that's kind of hilarious that it's actually a highly debated topic.
But if you watch it again, you will see that like if you focus on Han, he wiggles in a way that's with some sort of weird editing thing that they added in later.
Incredible. But yeah, so then he gets up and he leaves and he apologizes to the bartender and tips him, which I think makes him a good guy.
Sorry for the mess.
Yeah, and then he just leaves. So then we cut back briefly to Darth Vader, and he says that Princess Leia is resistant to the mind probe. And somebody says, I think it was Tarkin, is that his name?
Yeah.
He says that perhaps she would respond to an alternative form of persuasion, which sounds very scary. Yeah. So not a fan of that.
And he also says we want to maybe test out our battle station.
Ooh, terrible stuff coming. I feel like the moments where we see Darth Vader are the only true moments of tension in the film so far. Because like we were saying in the last episode, whenever we hear something bad is about to happen, it then just immediately happens. But with Darth, we're cutting back and forth to him. So there is a little bit of buildup of like anticipation of what is that going to look like for her. But with Luke, it's just like, oh no, oh, there it is. And that's it. Yeah. So then we cut back to the stormtroopers on Tatooine searching, and the droids are hiding. And C-3PO, again, just being needlessly rude to R2-D2. Don't love that, but it is what it is. And meanwhile, Luke sells his cruiser, and he's complaining because it's not enough money. But Obi's like, relax, it's fine. We have to get out of here. And then I wrote down there's an elephant man following them.
Yeah.
But it turns out that he's not very important. He's just a random alien guy who is bought out by the stormtroopers. So,
Yep.
And then we see Jabba. I'm laughing because this is definitely another moment of improved CGI, right?
What was like the weird moment from this scene?
I think the shadow of Han's arm when he was pointing at him, and he just didn't seem to be in the exact right spot of wherever the original Jabba was, or wherever Han was told to point and move. I just felt like that was so off. He looked so out of place in this movie.
And how about when Han walks around him and like steps on his tail?
I did not notice that.
Oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. He like circles around him. He's like on one side of him, then he walks behind him. He steps on Jabba's tail. Jabba's like, ah, and then he like ends up on the other side.
How did I not notice that?
The reason that it looks so weird is originally Jabba, he was just a man. He was just a regular old man. And this scene you can actually watch if you search on YouTube.
No
it exists. He was just a person.
way.
Yeah, and then the scene actually got cut from the original movie. It didn't exist. The next time you see Han, he's just, meeting back up with Luke and Obi-Wan. He's like, all right, we gotta get out of here. But yeah, then in the re-release, they re-added in the scene and they made Jabba the big slug guy that he is today.
But this is another moment where I think they must have done it more than once, because I recognized Jabba when I saw him, but I have seen him as a slightly different variation. Still a giant slug man, but less well made.
When we see him again, he looks different.
Okay.
I think, I don't want to spoil it, but we do see him again at some point in the trilogy, and I believe that he is an animatronic.
Okay. That's what he looked like in whatever picture or gif I must have seen.
Yeah.
Okay. Super weird that he was not a creature. That's crazy. And that also explains why Harrison Ford seemed to not be acting towards the CGI creature, because the way he was pointing and just moving around him was just so off. Very bizarre.
It was very strange.
So basically, the scene is just Han asking to give him more time so that he can pay him, and he is explaining that he's just got to do this one little cargo run, and then he's going to have his money.
Yep.
And then we see Elephant Man again, who is actually just a random alien, and he tells the stormtroopers where the guys are, and another laser battle ensues, and Han gets away from them, and I wrote down, oh, Chewie is a co-pilot. Haha, cute.
Yeah.
Because I love Chewie. He's incredible. Is his full name Chewbacca?
Chewbacca, yeah.
Because they just call him Chewie the whole time.
Yeah, but he's Chewbacca.
He's adorable. He's incredible. I love his hair, and I just love everything about him.
I want to pet him.
I just want to be friends with him. I feel like that would be a lot of fun. So they do get onto the Millennium Falcon, and they're trying to speed away, and there are stormtroopers following.
But first, Luke calls it a piece of junk.
Oh yeah, I did write that down.
That's such a staple in the series. People just getting down on the Falcon and calling it names. And Han is like, she doesn't look pretty, but
She's fast.
Can do what you need her to do.
Yeah.
She's fast, yeah.
Yes, he's like, what? This is the Millennium Falcon? It's a piece of junk. So I did think that was pretty funny. Luke is a little bit whinier than I expected him to be.
I forget how whiny Luke is, but he is
whiny.
quite whiny.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how old he's supposed to be. Like, is he a teenager? Is he a kid? Or is he an adult?
I feel like he's probably like 18 or 19.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure how old he is.
Okay. I guess that makes sense that he's just like an annoying teenager.
Yeah, pretty much.
So he, in his typical annoying fashion, is like, why don't you just outrun them since the Millennium Falcon is so fast? And Han is basically just like, shut up, dude. Like, it's not that easy.
And he's like trying to touch stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he's like, what's that? Why does it look like that? Why is that doing that? And Han's like, go away, please. Like, I'm trying to outrun these bad guys. And they say a bunch of jargon that I don't fully know what was going on, but they need to get to light speed. So they're going into the Space Force. So a lot of information about what's going on there that I did not fully pick up on.
Just essentially, he's putting in the coordinates to where they need to go, making sure that they're not going to hit any supernovas or anything like that to get to, where they need to be.
So we go back to the Death Star, and Princess Leia is brought out, and she sees Tarkin, and she totally rips on him. Like, she's like, oh, I should have known it was you. I smelled you when I got onto the ship, which was such a burn. I loved it.
I loved that, yeah.
Yeah. So it turns out that they are heading over to Alderaan, and Tarkin says that he is going to destroy the whole planet, which is Princess Leia's home planet. And he says, you got to tell me where the base is, or I'm going to blow up Alderaan. And shockingly, Leia does give up some information. She says that the rebel base is on Dantooine, which I think sounds very similar to Tatooine.
It sure does, but it's irrelevant.
Oh, okay.
It's just some other insignificant planet.
Oh, okay.
Tatooine is a fairly insignificant planet. It just happens to be pretty significant in the Luke Skywalker saga.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is his home planet, so just based on that, it seems pretty important.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to come back anyway. But anyway, so Tarkin tells them to blow up Alderaan anyway. And he's like, ha, you thought that I wasn't going to do it, but I'm doing it anyway. And Leia is absolutely distraught. So then we cut back to the Millennium Falcon, and Luke is learning how to use the Force. He's got this little mini replica version of like an evil ship, I guess, and he is using his lightsaber to try to get it. And Obi gets a bad feeling, and he has to sit down for a minute. He said there's a disturbance in the Force, and he said something like it sounds like millions are crying out.
Yeah, and then silenced.
Yeah, so it seems to me like he felt in the Force the planet of Alderaan being blown up, which is a little unsettling. So I guess we know for a fact that it absolutely was blown up in that moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, we saw it happen. We saw the Death Star activate and blow it up.
Yeah, that's true. But I wasn't sure if it was maybe a trick.
No, it was. And so Princess Leia lost her home. She lost her father, her whole family in one instant.
Yeah, absolutely terrible. But I think there was this very cute moment, not to cut away from Princess Leia losing everything she's ever loved, but we do see the droids and Chewie
playing a game.
I just wrote alien chess, which I loved. Again, like I would just watch a whole movie of them just goofing off. And that's when we find out that Chewie is a Wookiee, because Chewie loses, or he loses a part of the game or something, and he starts whining like crazy. And C-3PO is kind of making fun of him a little bit. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but Han basically was like, you probably shouldn't make fun of him because he is known to rip people's arms out when he is upset. And I was like, oh my gosh, the arm ripping.
The symbolism.
What is the symbolism of this? What does it all mean?
What does it mean?
I'm going to Google it. I bet there's some sort of secret symbolism. Do you ever just watch a movie or know a movie very well and then randomly stumble across this like crazy conspiracy theory or like meaning of the film that you were just like, this has never occurred to me ever?
Yeah. You're going to come up with something for this.
Yeah. I'm going to be the person who comes up with a theory about the arm pulling out, because this is a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to find some symbolism in it. Don't you worry.
Nice.
But anyway, Han is also, speaking of ripping on things, Han is ripping on the Force. And he just says it's just simple tricks and nonsense, which again, I'm pretty surprised because I guess they haven't seen the Force happening, but it is really interesting to see so many people being very dismissive when me as the audience has seen so many instances. To me, it just seems like it's 100% a thing. And all these people are like, nah, it's not real.
Yeah, I really just think for them, it's like they haven't seen it before. To Han, it's just some religious mumbo jumbo. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't exist. And he's going to dismiss it.
Well, Obi is not thrilled with that. that. So he kind of wants to prove that the Force exists, in my opinion. So he makes Luke wear a helmet where he can't see, and then he tells him to use the Force to find where the little replica ship is so that he can fight it. And he gets really frustrated, but then he figures it out very quickly. So again, not much tension there with him not figuring things out, but it's totally fine. And meanwhile, we cut back to the situation with Darth Vader, and we find out that there were scouts that went to Dantooine, and it turns out that the rebel base is long abandoned over there. So Leia actually did not give up information, and Darth mentioned something about how she would never willingly or purposely betray the rebels. So I thought that was interesting that Darth has so much insight into her person.
Yeah.
So then we cut back to the Falcon, and the crew is coming out of hyperspace, and they are in some sort of meteor field situation, and it becomes clear pretty quickly that Alderaan has been blown up, and this is just kind of the remnants of it. And they also find out pretty quickly that there is a little ship nearby, and they say it's a short-range fighter, and they're trying to figure out how he got there, and they were like, he couldn't have followed us, right? And there's no base nearby, and Luke is like, oh, look, he's going to that small moon.
That's no moon.
Yeah.
That's a space station.
And Obi says that great line, which again, I think that's something I've heard from you before. So you're just out here quoting Star Wars all the time, huh? So then Han is like, this is not good. They're all trying to get away, and Han's trying to turn around, and Luke is being annoying, and he's like, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you turning around? And he's like, dude, I can't. Like, I'm literally you don't see me trying right now. And they can't because there is a magnetic field going on, I think. Is that what it is?
Yeah, there's some sort of gravitational force from the space station.
And Obi says, you can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting. So that is a little foreshadowing, although there's definitely fighting that happens. So it's not that good of foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So the ship goes in, stormtroopers go to check it out, I guess. And Darth knows that what's happening is that they are trying to bring the plans to the princess.
Yeah, they recognize the ship from Mos Eisley's.
Yes. At one point, I think I skipped over this, but they did say to kill Princess Leia. But because of this, he was like, oh, wait, she might be important. So let's hold on to her for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they search the ship, and the ship seems to be empty. And they think it's a decoy, but Darth is like, no, definitely not. And he senses a presence. So he leaves because he senses this presence, which I thought was a little strange because I feel like he should have explored it further if he sensed that.
Yeah, that scene is so weird because he's like, I sense something, a presence, and then like immediately walks away like in the middle of his sentence.
Yeah, exactly. And it turns out that the crew was hiding in a smuggling compartment. So just further proof that Han isn't necessarily the best guy, but he's being good right now. So we'll take what we can get. And then we see these two guys bring a box onto the ship, which I wrote down, is this a scanner?
That's a great question.
Well, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't come into play too much. At one point, we think we hear one of them be like, hey, can you help me out up here? And the stormtrooper that is guarding the front of the ship comes up, and we hear some pew, pew, pew lasers blasting. And then another stormtrooper comes out, but it's very clearly not actually a stormtrooper. And there is a guy like in a command center, and he's trying to figure out what's going on down there. And whoever's in the stormtrooper costume pretends that his transmitter is bad. And it doesn't really matter because then Chewie immediately comes in and starts knocking people out. And it turns out that it was Han Solo and Luke in the stormtrooper costumes.
Yep.
So then I didn't really get exactly what was happening with R2-D2 kind of plugging in. Was that to see how to get the ship out of the Death Star?
Yeah, so he can plug into the ships to sort of like see how the ship runs. He can see the map of the ship. He can basically control the ship. He can shut power down, things like that. So he was just trying to figure out where they needed to shut down power in order to get the ship to be able to leave.
Okay. That makes sense. And then Obi needs to leave, I guess, to fight Darth Vader. And he says he needs to go alone and that his path is different from Luke's. And again, I was a little lost on why they wouldn't just stick together.
I think that Ben senses
You mean Obi?
Vader. Oh my gosh. I think Ben feels just as connected to Vader as he does to him, and he knows that, like, he can distract Vader, and if he makes his presence known, Vader will come to him.
So Luke and Han Solo are left behind with the droids, and they are just going at each other. They're fighting a little bit on what to do. At first, Han is mad because he's like, we're just sitting ducks in here and they're just gonna come capture us. And then R2-D2 actually finds Princess Leia, which another weird moment because C-3PO is like, oh, I don't understand what's going on here. He keeps saying, I found her. And Luke is like, found who? And he says, Princess Leia. And I'm like, then what don't you understand? That's what he's saying. He found Princess Leia. She's on the ship. Like, what's there to understand? Why are you acting confused about this?
C-3PO, the lovable idiot.
I keep getting so mad at him, and now I'm just fully convinced that he's a bad guy, and I don't know. I don't know if it's another Bilbo situation, but I'm getting frustrated because I just don't trust him. So then R2-D2 basically beeps that that she's scheduled to be terminated, and Luke, because he's for some reason immediately fallen in love with her, is like, no, we have to save her. And then Han is like, no, we're supposed to stay here. And Luke's like, you just said that we were sitting ducks and now you want to stay here. So they're fighting again. And then finally, Luke cooks up a little plan in his mind. And he's like, Princess Leia is super rich, just so you know. If you rescue her, she'll probably give you a reward. And Han is like, oh, I want a huge reward for this. And Luke is like, yeah, she'll pay it, whatever, let's go. So then they cook up a plan, well, it's Luke's plan, really, to pretend that Chewie is captured and that they have to bring him to where Princess Leia is, which is the detention block. And I don't love what happens here because they just leave the droids and C-3PO is like, hey, what do we do if we get caught? And Luke is just like, lock the door. And Han is like, and hope they don't have blasters. Bye. And then they just leave. So again, just the disrespect. Everyone in this movie is just disrespecting each other. Yes. And then meanwhile, we also just see Obi sneaking around and Darth definitely senses him. So they're just having like a weird moment. Again, this is kind of the tension building that I was expecting to see with Luke, but at least I'm seeing it with Darth. So that's good. Yeah. So then back to the detention block. The very funny moments where they go through, they're like bringing Chewie to the elevator. And then at one point, another guy tries to get onto the elevator and they kind of like wave him off and they're like, oh, I got a prisoner. So that was pretty funny. Then they go into, I guess, like the main area of the detention block. And there's a commander there. And I don't know if it was Luke or Han, but basically they're like, oh, there's a prisoner transport. And the commander guy is like, I'm going to have to confirm that that's the case. But then Chewie attacks and then we have another cool laser battle moment.
Pew, pew,
pew, pew. A lot of pewing. And and it looks like Han and Luke and Chewie are the winners of this battle. And then the intercom is like, hey, what's going on over there? And Han is like, oh, everything's fine. So everything's great. Don't come down here. And whoever's on the intercom is like, oh, we'll send backup. And he's like, no, don't do that. There's a leak. Everything's on fire. Bad stuff happening. Don't come. And then the guy's like, we're going to send somebody anyway. And then he shoots the intercom and he's like, that was a boring conversation anyway. So whatever.
I love that scene.
That seems like a very you scene.
It was funny.
And then Luke is running down the detention block. He finds Leia. He's still fully in his stormtrooper costume. And she is one sassy lady because she's just laying there and she's like, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? And he's like, what? And then he's like, oh, I'm wearing the stormtrooper outfit. So he takes off his helmet and he says, I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to save you. And she's like, oh, who are you? I'm sorry, what? And he's like, oh, I'm with Obi-Wan Kenobi. And she's like, oh, Ben.
Well, he says Ben. He's like, I'm with Ben Kenobi. And she's like, Ben Kenobi. But it's like, how does she know that his name's Ben? Anyway.
Ben's his nickname. Well, no, Obi's his nickname. Ben is his legal name. And Juan is his middle name.
Obi-Wan is his name. Ben was like his in hiding name. But anyway, suspension of disbelief here that she knows who Ben Kenobi is.
Yeah, it's fine. So then we go back to Darth and he's with Tarkin and he says he can feel Obi. And Tarkin just does not believe him, which I thought was pretty funny. And then they hear that there's an issue in the detention block with Leia, and they're like, oh no, send troops. And at this point, I'm thinking, wouldn't you believe Darth at this point that maybe Obi is causing trouble right now?
And that maybe there's something with the Force. But he's also saying stuff like, the Jedi are extinct. You're the only one that's left. But yeah, no one's believing Vader at all.
Yeah. And, in typical movie villain fashion, he's like, I have to face Obi alone. Although he might call him Obi-Wan.
He definitely does not call him.
He calls him by his nickname.
I can guarantee that he did not call him Obi. Also, that Obi-Wan was Vader's master, right?
Yes, he did mention that in the beginning. So then we get another big laser fight with Luke and Leia and Han, and they are trapped because they kind of blew up the entrance area, so they can't get out. And Leia is again being a super sassy, and she's like, this is some rescue. Like, what are you doing? And Han is like, oh, it's Luke's fault. He's an idiot. He was the brains of the operation. And then Leia takes his gun, his blaster, and blasts a hole in the wall or this vent area. And then she dives in, and then Chewie makes a move to follow her. And he is not thrilled about what's going on.
Yeah.
And Han is like, I don't care if it smells like trash, just go. And he starts smacking him down there. And then they eventually make their way down. And it turns out that it is some sort of garbage chute situation into a big old pile of garbage.
I do love that we are living in the 70s right now, but we have a woman who is just orchestrating her own rescue. She's like, these men can't do it. I'm going to do it myself. And she takes charge.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. And I thought it was an interesting difference. Again, just calling back to season 1 when we watched Lord of the Rings, where we had characters that we were told were strong female characters, but we didn't really get to see them in action too much. We've only seen Princess Leia a handful of times, and already she has really proved herself to be very strong, very powerful. She knows what she has to do, and she's not afraid to do it, and she doesn't really care about the guys.
She's not just some damsel in distress. She could take care of herself. Not all princesses are just sitting by waiting for a prince to save them. She can save herself.
So I have to say, in part 1, I was thinking to myself, why is Leah so obsessed with this character? But now seeing her in this second section, I am fully understanding why you like her so much. I know you like a very independent baddie.
She's a baddie.
And she definitely is,
and
yeah.
Carrie Fisher herself, outside of the Princess Leia role, is a baddie, so.
Well, a baddie playing a baddie. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
So we have Chewie, and he is absolutely pissed about all of this garbage being everywhere, and he is complaining so loudly. And it turns out that there's also a monster in the room with them with all the garbage. And everyone's upset. Princess Leia is very mad at everyone because she's like, this is not really a rescue. You guys kind of effed me over. And Han is like, you were the one who wanted us to go in the trash chute, so this is kind of your fault. And Luke is just, I don't know, chilling. Nobody's happy right now. And then this little eyeball pops out. There's like water. I don't know if it's sewage or whatever.
It's gross.
It's really gross. So then this eyeball pops out. And it's kind of reminding me of like the Real Monsters because it looks like a hand holding an eyeball.
Yes, it did look like that.
And then it grabs Luke. I actually thought for a while that it grabbed Han. Let me explain what happens. Basically, the monster grabs Luke, pulls him under, and they can't figure out where he is. He comes back up, and he's like, shoot him. My gun's not working, or my blaster's not working. And Han is like, where? And he says, anywhere. Which, that's why I was so confused, because I thought that the roles were reversed. I thought it was Han who was trapped. Because why would Han be like, where do I shoot him? Obviously, anywhere you can.
Yeah.
So I was like a little confused. And also, I feel like in this lighting, they looked very similar. So I was just struggling with that. But yeah, then the monster randomly just lets go, and Luke comes up again and he's fine, and he's like, I don't know why he let go. But it turns out that the trash is being compacted, and this is actually like my worst nightmare. Just being in a room where the walls are like closing and you know that you are going to be smushed.
Yeah.
Absolute nightmare. Worse than quicksand. So Han and Leia are trying to be very proactive about it. They find this very convenient pole and they're trying to hold it up to stop the walls from going in. Luke is just, I don't know, pushing against the wall, and he's just screaming into his little comm link for C-3PO. And then we actually cut back to C-3PO for a minute, and he's hiding because the stormtroopers have figured out that something is going on in that room where the two droids are, and he comes up with a very clever little front here. So the stormtroopers come in, they find him hiding, and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Like, they went to the prison block. Hopefully you can get them in time. And the stormtroopers are like, oh, thanks. And actually, there was a moment here. I've seen trivia on this, although I didn't know. I knew it was from Star Wars, but I didn't know the context. But there is a moment where they walk into that room and one of the stormtroopers smacks his head on the door. I know that it actually was a blunder by the actor who was in the stormtrooper costume. And I just died laughing at that part. It was incredible. So I love that they kept that in. That was just amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's one stormtrooper who is left to stand guard, and C-3PO knows he has to get out of there. So he's like, oh, they kind of messed up this droid. Can I go take him to maintenance? And the stormtrooper's like, yeah, go ahead, whatever.
This is the good thing about being a droid, because nobody pays attention to you. Nobody really cares what you're doing.
Absolutely. So then they're walking along, and I think they connect to another section, and C-3PO is worried, and he's like, I can't find them. I don't know what's going on. And R2-D2 beeps at him, and he says in his beepy language, why don't you check your comlink? And C-3PO's like, oh yeah, I totally forgot I had that. So he turns it on, and he's like, hello, Luke, are you there? And Luke is like, oh my gosh, dude, we're literally about to get crushed. Can you turn off the trash compactors? We are going to die. So C-3PO relays the message. R2-D2 shuts it down with very little time to spare. And they start cheering and celebrating, and hilariously, C-3PO hears them cheering and is like, oh, I'm such a doofus. They died.
They're dying, R2. Listen to them.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I hear them crying out, and it's absolutely hilarious. So it turns out that they are, in fact, alive. And that is where we finish this section of the movie.
Yes. Originally, I had us ending where Luke runs in to get Leia, but then I thought, I can't have two sections of this movie go by without seeing our main cast together, Luke, Han, and Leia. So we had to go a little farther to get the three of them in the room together. So I thought the garbage trash compactor scene was a good scene to just see how this trio functions together.
It's a very interesting dynamic. I'm not gonna lie, it's not at all what I expected. And I know I keep saying that, but it's just the truth. I didn't realize that they would be so at odds with each other so much. And it seems like everybody thinks simultaneously that they know best and that they also don't know anything. And then they all get mad at each other for also thinking they know best and not knowing anything. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I'm curious to see how it continues. Should I make some end of movie predictions?
Yes.
Well, I think there's definitely going to be a big explosive battle between Obi and Darth.
Yeah.
My two pals. And I think that is where I'm going to see a lot of the imagery that I associate with Star Wars. Because one of the big reasons why I keep on saying this is not what I expected is I thought it was going to be a lot of lightsaber battles.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we're going to see at the end of the movie. And I think that obviously, I mean, this movie is so long, like the series of movies. So Darth is definitely going to get away, but that's all I can predict.
We still have the plans to the Death Star that need to get to the Rebel base. Okay. You know, if they're going to get R2 there, if Leia, Han, and Luke are going to get off the Death Star, what Han's role is going to be in all this, because he was just a smuggler, and now all of a sudden he's like wrapped up in the rebellion.
I don't know why, but in my mind, I have a feeling that the rest of the movie is going to take place on the Death Star because it was originally a trilogy. I just think that this story is going to feel like it was not left unfinished, but like left on a cliffhanger. I think they're going to spend the rest of the time in the Death Star trying to find a way out. And I think it's going to end with them getting out. Maybe Darth gets away, or maybe Obi barely escapes with his life. So that's my prediction.
Well, I'm excited for you to see the rest.
I am getting a little nervous. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, I mean, I just predicted what's going to happen, but I'm nervous. I guess it's too early of a movie, like being the time period that it was. I don't think I have to worry about main characters dying off very quickly because I don't think that was as much of a thing back then. So maybe I don't have anything to worry about. I'm sure it'll all be happily ever after because, again, that's your favorite type of movie.
I do have a question for you. Part of me wants to wait to section 3, but it's honestly been a topic of conversation, not just between me, but my roommate as well. Okay. There's a lot of stakes in this. Oh, no. And we have been wondering all week what your opinion on Han was going to be, if you're going to like Han or not. Is it too early?
No, I actually, I immediately liked him. Do you want me to tell you my
Okay.
favorite characters now?
Yeah.
Okay, Chewie and Han are actually my favorites.
Yeah. Oh, she's going to be so excited. I can't wait to tell her.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, I think Luke is going to end up being great, but as of right now, I think he's still in the stage where he still feels a little bit like a reluctant hero because he doesn't fully know what he's doing, which is annoying. Obi, I think, is fine. Princess Leia, I think, is cool, but I haven't seen enough of her to really know who she is aside from being a sassy captive. And C-3PO, I don't know if he's going to be a bad guy. And R2-D2, I struggle with because I don't know what he's saying, although it's funny because I love Chewie and I have no idea what he's saying, but he's just fuzzy and it's cute.
Yeah. So my roommate had showed this trilogy to two friends of ours recently for the first time, and they did not like Han at all.
Really?
And I said, Kelly's gonna like him. Mark my words, Kelly is gonna like him.
An anti-hero is actually my favorite type of hero. I feel like you tend to really like the villain. I like the good guy who is not a good guy, but he's being reluctantly a good guy for the sake of the world. That's like one of my favorite types of characters. Although I think you like them a lot too, actually. But I think you're very big on the villains. I don't know.
I do like villains. Ooh, wait till we get to the third trilogy.
I wonder if we're gonna see. I'm so curious what Darth looks like. I don't know if we're gonna find out until even like the prequels, but I'm so curious what's under the mask. I'm wondering if the breathing device thing is because he has some sort of grievous injury.
That's a good prediction.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out next week.
Come join us next Thursday for the last installment of episode 4, A New Hope.
And don't forget, if you're enjoying this so far, I don't know if there are people who are listening now who maybe didn't listen to the first season. You don't have to listen to the first season in order to follow us along here. We're doing a totally different franchise. But if you haven't already, please consider giving us a rating. It really helps out our podcast. It helps us get discovered by new people. And if you want to be a part of the conversation, if you want to make fun of us, if you want to argue with us about anything, or if you want to talk about how I'm very good at predicting things, we are on Twitter. So you can find us at All Geek Podcast.
Yes.
And we'll have to see you next week.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the It's All Geek to Me podcast, hosted by Leah and Kelly. Make sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player and give us a rating. You can also follow us on Twitter at All Geek Podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday. See you next week.